Unauthorized opinions expressed on the internet would be censored.
We are live. We are live. This is real. Welcome back to Unauthorized Opinions, UOPod.com. Like, share, subscribe.
It's pure propaganda and it's super cringe, by the way.
I literally went to the polls with nothing in mind. I saw a can of orange soda in the parking lot. And I was like, yeah, there we go. An unopened can of orange soda just chilling in the parking lot. I was like, yeah, I got to vote for Trump, dude.
Your podcast sucks. It's mental, mate. It's absolutely mental.
I'll be honest, I thought it was kind of offensive when you talk so much about the Loch Ness Monster.
Political climate.
And Andrew, treat yourself, okay? Especially if you start, I don't know, getting in good with homeless people.
Unauthorized Opinions, streaming everywhere at uopod.com. Cock-a-doodly-doodly-doo, man. Welcome back. Welcome back. It's hard for me not to start with the song Unauthorized Opinions. I appreciate you guys joining me for this special episode. Earlier in the week, we did an interview with Michael Knowles. We're going to play that for you here today. We talked about the University at Buffalo, and side note, it's University at Buffalo, not University of Buffalo. So that doesn't make sense right off the top, right? But they, on their homepage, one of their faculty websites, like one portion of their schools, like the media studies, I believe it was, they had a disclaimer about Michael Knowles, disavowing him, saying he was mean, essentially. They said some libelous things, I think, that's just my opinion, it's not a legal opinion, don't worry, that he called for genocide. You know, this is some really old stuff from like a year ago. They're claiming he called for genocide against transgender people, which of course didn't actually happen. So we talked about that. We talked a little bit about polling. We talked about, Kamala Harris and if people are actually believing what she's saying and how her campaign is operating and the whole media apparatus as a whole. So that was a great talk, and we're going to play that for you. And then afterwards, we're going to play for you some interviews I had at a recent event where I spoke to a man about, government housing, housing prices, immigration and stuff, and we had a good little exchange there. And another interview I did with a guy, it was a little bit informal, that I thought was even more interesting about native, Aboriginal, Indian activism, whatever you want to call it, land acknowledgements. And that kind of ties into what was on the University at Buffalo website below the Michael Knowles disclaimer. So after they said he was a really bad guy, essentially, they go on to say all this stuff about land acknowledgements and how their university is on native stolen land, of course. And I argued with a guy about this for a decent amount of time, and his sort of side of this was that the government, just by declaring as such that this land should be recognized as native land, therefore it's a good thing. So it was a government-heavy episode. The other person I argued with real estate about said, it's not the government's fault that there's too much immigration or that costs of living are too high, so we're going to get to those as well. I hope you enjoy the episode. I had a lot of fun talking with Michael Knowles. You'll notice at the second half that I'm not in it as much. You'll hear my voice, but for the audio listeners, that won't make a difference. But for the video viewers, that was because we were having problems with our connection. We had to try a few different things to record the interview with, so that was just a result of it. But you'll see me at the beginning. It wasn't just a voiceover. I wasn't just, calling into a PA system at the Daily Wire studios. So check it out. Here's my interview with the Daily Wire's Michael Knowles. Pull me away from Oasis rumors. I think that's what we're doing right now. Thanks for joining me. Are you ready to start at any time?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, this idea, first of all, let me just straight up ask you, Michael, what is the University of Buffalo known for besides having a blue football field? They're one of a few places that have a blue football field, and they have taken it upon themselves to warn, applicants, faculty members, students about Michael Knowles. Where does this come from, and what is the University of Buffalo trying to do with this position?
I am not terribly familiar with the University of Buffalo. I'm not a graduate of the University of Buffalo. I've never been employed by the University of Buffalo. So I was as surprised as anyone to find that I am featured on the homepage of one of the university's academic departments. Not only featured, but I actually make up the second paragraph on the study department, in which I am denounced repeatedly for apparently having called for genocide. So any sort of denouncement for just never been particularly gung-ho for would be surprising. But I suppose the cherry on top of this bizarre little sundae is that I've only visited the University of Buffalo on one occasion about a year and a half ago. I was invited to give a speech. The speech was on feminism, and then I was denounced for observing that transgenderism isn't real and is not conducive to anyone's flourishing because it isn't real, in a different speech that I gave more than 2 years ago at a different event in Washington, D.C.
So I'm going to read the statement here that they have, or they had actually. So I've just checked. They have changed it as of at least a bit ago, within the last day since I last checked it. We checked it before we came on. They have changed it, but this is what it did say. The faculty of the Media Study Department stand in solidarity with the transgender community. I got to do the AOC thing here. And others who have been the target of Michael Knowles' rhetoric and threats of eradication and genocide. While we are committed to the free and open exchange of ideas, we are also committed to inclusiveness, social justice, and respect for all. There is no space for hate speech, as there can be no open exchange of ideas without inclusion, justice, and respect. We view Michael Knowles' public appearance on our campus as contrary to the values and aims of our academic community. Now, I have just checked. They have changed, to confirm, they have changed their whole front page here. Now, the main header stays the same, where they introduce the department and everything, but they have replaced it with two larger statements likely to distract the reader. One says Department of Media Study Diversity Statement and Values, and another says Department of Media Study Action Plan for Diversity. So now, Michael, they have replaced their comments about you in the last 24 hours with a land acknowledgement, and I'll read part of that too. We are proud to be a part of a public land grant university whose mission is to provide access and opportunities for all people, Black, Indigenous, persons of color. We operate on the territory of the Seneca Nation, a member of the Haudenosaunee Six Nations Confederacy. Tra-la-la. Michael, they appear to have, changed their tune a little bit. Why do you think that is? Can you give any insight as to why, it's so important to denounce what you allegedly have said in the past and apparently present, that we just change it on a whim as soon as people get notion of it?
Well, I'm pleased to hear that we won. And I, after a year and a half, will no longer be permanently denounced on the homepage of a public university's academic department. It shows you that these people, with a little bit of reason and a little bit of pushback, will fold like a cheap suit. I suspect that the reason they took it down is not because they like me all of a sudden, or they realize that a man can't really become a woman. I suspect the reason they took it down is the same reason that Rolling Stone changed its defamatory headline about me shortly after I gave my speech at CPAC a couple years ago. Same reason that Huffington Post changed its defamatory headline against me, which is that they were legally liable for libel. Even in our corrupted political system, one cannot simply go about accusing other people of calling for genocide without facing the possibility of legal repercussions. And while American law sets a rather high threshold on libel, for libel and defamation, there is still a limit, and they transgressed that limit quite clearly. For those who don't remember the speech that I gave now long ago, I said that for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely, the whole preposterous ideology at every level. I'm not really sure how one could infer from that rather clear statement that I wanted anyone to suffer a genocide. In fact, I said that in particular, the poor people who are suffering from confusion over their sex would stand to benefit from obliterating this, or eradicating, pulling up from the root, this ideological confusion that is contrary to reality. And it's a confusion that's being peddled at the highest levels of our liberal political order. It holds that a man can be a woman and a woman can become a man. And if one suffers any sort of sexual confusion, that one ought to mutilate oneself, castrate oneself, take cross-sex hormones that lead to sterility, and follow a psychological program that the best data we have show leads to anxiety, depression, and even suicidality at rather high numbers. So I'm glad that the lawyers presumably called up the media study department and told them to shape up a little bit before the public university at Buffalo faced a defamation lawsuit.
It was a very bizarre thing to have on the front page of any given department for a university. I don't know, would they be denouncing Elon Musk on the front page of their science department, for example? But I kept looking over to make sure I didn't miss anything in this statement. But they go on about 3 or 4 times about wanting to, create the inclusive environments and practices for all these different races, of course. And they said they would even possibly, they used the term suggest. I would go as far as to say force their faculty to, quote, assign content that is BIPOC oriented and that addresses diversity. So this is a sort of thing where they're saying, whenever we see fit, we're going to force our staff to talk about people who we are perceiving to be lesser than us, or at least achieve lesser than other people of certain other races. Really weird stuff. But I wanted to ask you specifically about the land acknowledgement portion. And because living up here in Canada around the Great Lakes region, we see this everywhere. There is this activist class who wishes to have land acknowledgements assigned on university campuses and even public parks. I'll mind you, I read one last year that said, this park didn't exist during the time that this native tribe was here in these lands, we actually still own it. And I'm paraphrasing, of course. What do you think compels people who had nothing to do with any wars involving the French, English, or native tribes in the region? What do you think compels them to want to concede to this idea that there would be no civilization without any of these native tribes?
Well, they hate white people, to put it simply, and they hate the civilization that white people have embodied, which was once known as Christendom and now is known as the West. They hate that, so they express a hatred toward white people, and ironically, in so doing, they are expressing a hatred for all sorts of other people as well. I mean, consider what they say about BIPOC-oriented literature. What does that mean? Does that mean that Turgenev and Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Shakespeare and Dante and Milton and Virgil, that's fine for the white people, but black people don't deserve to read any of those writers. The black people have to settle for reading the inchoate scribblings of Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo? Is that what we're saying? That is to say that only white people ought to receive an education, and no other sort of people ought to receive an education, which is rather hateful as far as I'm concerned, toward specifically the so-called BIPOC people. And you see other incoherent expressions of this hatred, this appetitive reflex that they seem to have when they say that, we have to acknowledge that the land was owned by the Lakota Sioux, say. Mount Rushmore is really secretly owned by the Lakota Sioux, but of course the Lakota Sioux didn't spring up out of the Black Hills as if they were a tree or a plant. They came in there and they took that land from the Cheyenne. So do we give the land back to the Lakota Sioux, or do we give it to the Cheyenne? Well, what about the other people that were there even before the Cheyenne, the Kiowa or the Arapaho or the other Indians that came before them? Do we give land in the Midwest and the southern states to the Apache, or I suppose we'd give them to the Comanche, but the Comanche took them from the Apache. Do we give them to the group that the Apache took them from? Where does it where does it end? Well, I guess it ends all the way back at the Garden of Eden, but they don't believe in that either.
I like to call it the overturn any war that I don't like theory. That's my succinct way of putting it after having that argument several times. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, sort of on this topic of how are we're just picking a period in time to start from for these arguments. The Kamala Harris and now Tim Walz campaign, they seem to be taking steps towards, what might be considered as the center, as people will do upon election times. We're hearing stuff about the wall. They used it in a promotion. The no tax on tips as well. They have this TikTok campaign where they pretend that Kamala's really cool and popular with young people. I wanted to ask you, in your infinite wisdom, as I would categorize it as, Michael.
Very kind.
No problem. Do they really believe this sort of stuff works and gets by with the people? Because I sit here and I think these seem like campaigns from a 23-year-old marketing major, or at best a political science major, and they say these are the great social media campaigns. These are popping on the social medias these days. Do they really believe that these work, or is it a fake it till you make it sort of scenario, or is there something more at play that the common commentator like myself doesn't catch between the lines or something like that?
Well, it is fake and totally contrived, and it also probably will work. So I guess both of those alternatives are probably simultaneously correct. It's fake in that we know that Kamala Harris supports an open border. We know this through her actions. She is the border czar, imbued with presidential authority by Joe Biden for the last 3 years, and she has left the border practically open. We know that Kamala Harris has said, it's still available on her X account, that illegal aliens are not criminals. Of course they are. By definition, they're criminals. We know that her running mate, Tim Walz, has said that if the government were to build a 25-foot wall, he would try to build a 30-foot ladder factory to allow foreign nationals illegally to enter into the country. So we know they support open borders. And now all of her messaging suggests that when she's elected president, even though she's effectively the president right now, and she is the vice president, when elected president, she will crack down on the border. And they're doing this because open borders are extremely unpopular with voters, and they know that this will be a close election under the best of circumstances for them. So they're lying. It's totally fake. It's totally contrived. But they might well get away with it because the liberals control the entire establishment media, and they also control most of the big tech platforms. Conservatives have an opportunity to speak on X, but X is the smallest of the big tech platforms. So many voters who are not plugged in, who are not reading your work, listening to you, who are not watching, the Blaze or the Daily Wire or other places, will have no idea what Kamala Harris really believes about the border. All of her previously held positions have been memory hold. And so for the 7% of undecided, often low information voters, as ridiculous as the Democrats' campaigns are right now, they very likely will work.
Are you believing these polls that had Kamala in front for a few weeks? Is that just the reaction to her candidacy? And I'll preface it with the idea that I have a friend who's involved with politics. He just started getting his own polls conducted. He's like, it's only a couple $100. Call up this polling agency. They'll conduct a poll for you. I mean, if it's that easy, Michael, should we be trusting, any polling sector to whatever degree or whatever legitimacy they may have had in the past? Should we be hanging our hats on this at all? I mean, within 1 week, we have Kamala Harris leading by 5 points in some places, and then the next week, Trump is back up, almost to where he already was.
Certain polls are better than others, without question. The worst poll I've seen for the Republicans right now came out last Friday. It was a Fairleigh Dickinson poll that showed that Kamala was up 7 points, 50 to 43, and then 7% of voters undecided. Now, of course, that poll was conducted before Bobby Kennedy Jr. endorsed Donald Trump in the swing states. So, that poll today is basically worthless. And of course, national polls don't determine who becomes president. The presidency will be decided in probably about 7 states. And if you look in the swing states, the races separated by about 2 or 3 points. Bobby Kennedy was carrying 5 points in a lot of those states. So if he brings even a majority of his voters over to Trump, there's the election right there. Then there's, of course, on top of that, the wisdom that Franklin Roosevelt gave to Lyndon Johnson when Lyndon Johnson lost his first race, which is, oh, Lyndon, you've made a mistake. You conducted the campaign fine, but you forgot to sit on the ballot box. This is the wisdom that comes out in the expression that it doesn't matter who votes, it matters who counts the votes. And Lyndon Johnson would go on to steal the 1948 Senate seat in Texas by stuffing a ballot box. So I think a lot of the election, if it is close, is going to come down to mail-in ballots, often unsolicited, widespread now, drop boxes, ballot counting. It's amazing that in even third world countries with paper ballots, they can conduct an election in 24 hours. But in America, supposedly the strongest democracy in the world, with all of our technological advancements and electronic voting, it takes us days and sometimes even weeks. So I wouldn't put too much stock in the polls. She certainly got a boost. The Democrats, rather, certainly got a boost when they replaced a cadaver with a woman who, at the very least, has a pulse. So I don't deny that at all, but I strongly suspect she may have peaked. There aren't many more tricks that they can pull out. And now Kamala, for the first time, is going to have to face a reporter in a sit-down interview. It's a very friendly reporter who hates Donald Trump, and she's going to be able to tag team it with her teddy bear, Tim Walz, who can bail her out, if she feels insecure. But even then, Kamala is so bad at speaking, the one skill that is required of a politician, that it's hard to imagine the interview does her much good. It might not hurt her too much, but it probably won't do her much good. And then, of course, she'll have to face Trump at the debate. So they're trying to rig the one debate she's agreed to in her favor, just as they tried to rig the debate with Biden in Biden's favor. And that didn't work. Trump beat Biden so badly that Biden's no longer the nominee. So that debate will occur. And even if ABC puts its thumb on the scales for Kamala, she's just so bad at this, at retail politics. She's good behind the scenes, but at retail politics, she's so bad. It's hard to see how she continues any momentum she might have had. And if you look at recent polls, it would appear that the momentum in the race has finally started to shift back again into Trump's favor. So if I were the Democrats, I would not feel much relief. Even if certain polls have her up right now, I think the momentum is working against her.
Yeah, and if they run into trouble, we'll just talk about white guy spices or something like that. The shock and awe of him lying about that even was pretty spectacular. I don't know how anyone can overlook that.
This is something about politicians and people in general. When people are liars, they tend to lie about everything. People very rarely lie about just a few things. Either you have honesty and integrity or you don't. And so I'm not really surprised that Tim Walz would lie about something so apparently trivial as his taco recipe. And the reason we know that he's lying about that is he won a contest for a taco hot dish, and he puts all sorts of spices in that recipe, and then he jokes to be the punchline of the bumbling white guy that he only eats bland foods. But he also lied about his military service. He's also he lied about his position when he was teaching in high school. He lies about everything. So of course they're going to be dishonest. Now I don't know that those lies are going to catch up with them, because the media are going to flack for them, and the so-called fact checkers are going to lie on their behalf. Don't forget the lie on which Joe Biden launched his 2020 campaign was the notion that Trump called neo-Nazis fine people at Charlottesville. That did not happen. And even the left-wing fact checkers admitted that that was a lie, but they admitted it 7 years after the fact. So they allowed the lie to spread before, to save some credibility, they decided to admit the truth. I think probably what is more likely to do Kamala in, if she loses this election, is not going to be pointing out the lies and the inconsistencies. It's going to be pointing out her total lack of achievement and the failures of her extremely radical policies. That's something that voters who aren't paying a ton of attention to the political fights, who are just going about living their ordinary lives and trying to be normal, and in many ways they're much more blessed than those of us who are following politics so closely. I think that's what's going to register for them. I'm not better off than I was 3 years ago. This woman doesn't have anything to offer, and in fact, other than infanticide, the only concrete policies that she's promoting, she stole from Donald Trump.
That seems to be the word on the street, especially if you watch the Don Lemon interviews, that people do in fact notice that things are double and triple the price since the Biden-Harris administration took office. I guess I'll leave you on this, Michael, a very personal, if I may, question. Why do people like you and people like me, why do we love Cenk Uygur? We know what he's going to say. We know he's going to freak out. Is it the Homer Simpson-esque factor? I see you and him on Piers Morgan, and I'm just waiting for him to scream. I'm just waiting. I can't take this anymore. What is going on here? Why do we love him? I like Destiny goes on those things with you guys. I can't stand it. I think I almost feel bad for him. There's something wrong with that guy. But Cenk, I love. Why is that?
Cenk makes us nostalgic for an earlier age of politics, because Cenk really became popular in the 2000s and the early 2010s, which is when, at least speaking for myself, that's when I really began to be involved in politics. So there's a little nostalgia there. I don't mean to throw shade at him as someone who's past a sell-by date, but he reminds me of an earlier time of internet political media. But I think the other reason that we like him so much in this perverse way is that he expresses in his very comportment the incoherence of his ideas. When people are confident in what they believe and there's a logic to what they're saying, they don't get really angry. They don't become shocked and appalled. When I'm talking to a lib, I usually know what they're going to say, and I even kind of understand why they're saying what they say. Usually it's because they have mistaken premises, but the premises are not surprising to me. I've heard them my whole life. So generally speaking, when you see a debate between people, the calmer party usually wins, because the calmer party is usually secure in his views and anticipates what the other will say. And Cenk is never calm. His blood pressure is, I think, at about 7,000 beats per minute at all times, and that speaks to his general ideological confusion.
So that was my interview with Michael Knowles. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I had fun filming it. I want to remind you guys that we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/UOPod, or you can just go to unauthorizedopinions.com. This is where these interviews coming up originally came from. They were on there first and exclusively for weeks, and you're going to get more of that with some hockey players, some NHL players I spoke to, and all the time we're putting up exclusive interviews like that, and we like to put advanced versions of our videos out there first, and we like to put, you know, exclusive versions of our videos. Thinking back, you know, we have exclusive versions of our trip down to Texas with John Doyle. We have podcasts with Anomaly. So you'll get stuff there just by donating a few dollars a month. It's not really a donation. You're paying to get good content and exclusive content. So patreon.com/UOPod. Here are my interviews. They're really kind of just arguments. One of them's really fun. One of them's a bit more sad, about immigration and land acknowledgements. Where are we, people? There was. What do you mean?
No, it was a war with the U.S., but not with the Indians.
Oh, the natives fought a lot.
The U.S. has a war with the natives, but Canada were allies with the natives.
That's not true in all the cases. French, yeah, it's one war. The French fought against natives a lot. English fought against natives a lot.
I'm sure there's like thing, but there was no official war in Canada. And that's why I'm just. It's not me. I'm just. Like,
yeah, there's tons of battles.
It's history books. Like there's a war between you and natives, for sure. Seems like I'm not American, so I don't know. But I think you guys had some conflict, and then we had conflict with them too.
Yeah, exactly.
There was no official war the way you're.
Well, I know, but what I'm saying is that you could say land is unceded for any war, for any conflict that has happened, and just because you carry that on doesn't mean it's true. I mean, the land does belong to Canada, and using this imagery to further activism so that you can make money off of it and be like, hey, so what this is a photo opportunity.
They're not making that much money. They're giving the chance for the natives to showcase their culture.
But they're also saying this is what the city's actually called, and it's not.
Well, I don't know, like, you could get taken tax for the actual facts hundreds of years ago. I'm surprised you're riled up because it's so far from, it's not even in your country.
So I shouldn't care about things that aren't in the same country? I don't understand.
No, I'm just saying, like it's, like, I care about stuff in the U.S., but like, I can't do much, right?
Well, if you go to Rogers Center and you see the land acknowledgement they have inside of there,
They have everywhere.
that's written by an activist group.
It's written by one group. You could call them activists.
So it's not activism to get a gigantic corporation.
Not according to the Canadian government. It might be activist to you. But
Is the Canadian government, like, that's just one group of people?
Well, yeah, but you said activist, so whatever that means.
That means a person who is purposely wants to get that message to support their narrative.
Well,
it's
I
not
don't
just
know.
some guy who's just like,
Activists are
this
not-
is the fact, and therefore nobody can argue with it.
Activists or not, the government's letting them do that.
Yeah. So you can't disagree with that because the government's
Because
letting
we
it?
live here. Like the U.S.
So you
government-
you can't disagree with the government.
You could disagree, but you can't do much about it.
Okay, well, I mean, that's fair.
Right. It's just like in U.S. Like we live on the land. I know you should have your own rights and everything. So you have your kind of the First Amendment, Second Amendment, stuff like that, right? In the U.S.
No, I mean, the U.S. has native reserves as well, just like Canada does.
Yeah. But here, I think they have it a little bit more than the U.S.
Well, the U.S. has larger ones, but so do you agree with having a society within a society like that then?
Well, we have one that's not even native. You heard about Quebec, right?
Yeah.
They're kind of like a society within.
Well, that's
our
just
society.
Provincial versus federal government. They're still part of the government of Canada.
So we like to think, but not according to them.
Well, it depends on what issue.
It depends who you talk to.
So do you think do you think Quebec should be separated then, or?
What are you guys like? Which part of the spectrum are you like? On the political spectrum?
Conservative for sure.
Conservative, okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of conservative people here.
Well, do you think that like Quebec should secede or something? Like, do you believe that there should be the government within the country? Or, like,
Well, the government, for sure, it is what it is until you find a resolution, right? So what are you going to do? Like, there's distinct societies in America too. There's many groups that some
but
people
ones
might care
that
for.
outright reject the rule of the federal government,
You do? Yeah.
such
In the
as,
US.
such as.
I don't want to. Do you really want me to name names?
Yeah, sure.
Well, there's a lot of, Proud Boys.
What about the Proud? Like,
Right? They're kind of their own kind of distinct kind of.
well, that's an activist group. That's not, again, like, if you take the Proud Boys or you take, like, Antifa, these aren't...
So what is your question? Because you asked me what group that maybe they have their own way of doing things.
like an entire society, or, like,
Can you give me
self-governed,
an example of that?
like a native reserve. In Canada, where they're just like, we don't have to follow the same rules.
What do you mean by society, though?
The governing policies of the rest of the
Because
country.
they don't really have a government.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they have
don't have
chiefs and such.
Oh,
tribal
they
councils.
They have their own chiefs, but not that we care. Like, not that we care in the sense of legal. Like I don't.
Yeah,
have to
they
follow.
have jurisdiction under
No.
their own things.
They do, but
Yeah.
they don't have jurisdiction over the rest of the population.
Yeah, so I'm asking if you think that should be allowed or not.
Well, it is in Canada.
Do you think individually think that that should be allowed?
You can't really answer that.
Why?
It's like, do you think it's right to have First, Second, and Third Amendment to us? I don't know. It's just, it was there. It was there from before. It's a law.
So no changing laws? I don't understand.
It's very hard to change laws, as you know.
Yeah.
So right now, like in Canada, just like in the U.S., you can't change your amendments easily.
You can't, no.
Right, exactly.
You can
So
change
here,
lots.
they
Canada
made
doesn't
it
have a
into
real
law.
constitution.
So they made it into law, for better, for worse, and it's not maybe even our generation, right? They made it into law, so you got to live by it until someone changes the law.
Yeah, but do you believe it should be changed?
Well, what reason do you have to change it?
You're just avoiding the question.
No,
Do
but-
you think that
Like-
there should be? Do you think reserves should exist?
Why do you want to change it then at this time?
I'm asking you if you think that it should be or not. Why can't you answer that?
No, but it's not me. Like
It is you. I'm asking you. Do you think that they should be
I do.
allowed or not?
No, but for most of us, it's there.
Yeah.
We haven't thought about whether we should change it or not.
Lots of people have thought about that.
Have you thought about keeping it?
Yeah, of course.
Do you want to keep it or not? You don't want to keep it.
You're just turning the same question around on me that you're not
But
willing to question.
if you're willing to like nail me down on that question, maybe you should answer it first, right?
Okay, I do not think that native reserves should have their own autonomous governing bodies. I don't
Canada?
think in Canada or
You're
in
not
general.
Canadian, right?
Oh, I am Canadian.
You're Canadian?
Yeah.
But you're working for the U.S.?
Yes.
Okay.
So I do not believe that there should be an autonomous society self-governing outside of
And
the
what's-
rules of
what's,
this.
what's your reason for that?
Because if we are together as a country, then we should all be following the same laws. Well, of course, there's prevention. Well, they don't pay.
It's the same law.
They don't pay the same amount of taxes.
It's in the law. It's in the law.
So do you think they should have to follow the same rules as everybody else?
They do. But
No, they
some,
don't.
No, but some rules doesn't apply to every individual. In the
Do you
country.
think those rules should apply to every
No.
individual? So you don't.
You know what? Because like there are certain rules for senior citizens. There are certain rules for kids. There
And
certain
natives
rules
are
for-
different? They're
there
their
are-
own-
No. There's certain rules for certain groups. So we don't even follow every single rule there is right now. Like I don't belong to every group. I don't get all the benefits.
True.
I get only some, maybe whatever I fall into. So we're doing that now. So what are you saying about that? I can't remember now.
Well, I was just saying that I think that they should have, based on like ethnicity and the history and everything. I don't think that is reason enough to say for the rest of time.
Is that what you're? Are you like going to be a politician one day? Like you're gonna? No, because that's the only way to change it, right?
Well,
if
yeah.
you really feel that, then maybe one day.
It wouldn't be my top priority, no.
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 But you feel so passionate about it.
I feel passionately about a lot of things.
I know, but so you're not gonna? It's not gonna be a platform if you get elected.
It would be among my platform, yeah.
Okay.
Abolish the Indian
And
Act.
it's not that important then.
If it's on the platform, then it's important.
No, yeah, but you said you might not even run on that platform.
Well, I think in relative importance to a lot of things, it might not be the most important thing right now.
So I don't want to get too argumentative, but like right now, I believe there are certain. It's part of the law, right?
Yeah.
So until you change the law for better. or for
Well, I don't think
worse-
that's part of the law, no.
No, but they have certain rights.
Yeah.
As Aboriginals, so that's what it is.
All right. Well, that was fun,
Yeah.
Steve. Thanks.
We'll see you in.
Immigration too high?
Absolutely not. We need 1 million people to replace all the people leaving because of the baby boomers from the workforce. Over the next 5 years, 1 million people leave every year for the next 5 years. We're way too short. Our GDP is going to shrink and collapse. You asked the wrong person with that.
Not necessarily.
Okay, yeah. We need more immigration if Canada is going to survive, period. And we need to get that happening right away. As to how we're doing it, you might be doing it wrong. I agree with that. But I think there's a whole bunch of really cool mechanisms that Canada has developed, and they're underutilizing them.
We work for the government of Canada, Sean.
No, but I should.
Next question, how do we lower housing prices then? Is it just as simple as building more houses? Do we just build infinity houses? They can't seem to do it right now. What's the solution to higher costs of living?
So your assumption is that all houses should be lower cost?
No, my assumption is that housing prices have exploded in the last 2 years, as has immigration.
So you're connecting those two dots, and I'm not sure that they're necessarily connectable because the media has connected them. But the fact is, housing prices were raising already, and we're blaming immigrants for that problem, which is
We're not blaming immigrants. We're blaming the government.
We're blaming the government. Yeah. Well, the government's blamed for everything, right? We can blame that they're an easy patsy for that.
Okay.
But the fact is that immigration isn't directly proportional to housing crisis. Number one is that immigration tends to be a problem in places where, for example, we have a lot of students moving in, so a lot of the student-oriented places like Toronto and Waterloo, et cetera, have housing crises. You don't see that in Sault Ste. Marie.
Oh, the housing prices are insane in Sault Ste. Marie. Yes, they are.
Well, it's not as bad
they
as
are.
downtown Toronto.
Oh, nowhere's as bad as downtown Toronto, but you can say that about a lot of places. The housing prices all across Ontario are insane.
Yeah, we should stop building streets and start building elevators, like the rest of the world has done.
Interesting.
Japan puts a lot more people in in a lot less space, and they don't have as much space to use. We just are so used to having so much space that we tend to want everybody to have a giant lawn.
So people shouldn't have large lawns? What's with that? You can't have a lawn?
No, lawn is a serious...
Kaylin, how do you feel about that? Lawns or no lawn? What do you prefer?
I like my lawn, I guess.
She likes her lawn. Sean wants to take your lawn away from you.
How big a lawn do you actually need?
I don't need a big lawn, no. I don't need anything crazy.
How many butterflies and bees are you willing to kill so that you can
It's
like,
her
do
right.
like this
She wants
every
to
once in
have a
while?
big lawn. Why can't she have a big lawn?
Because we need the space to put up some elevators. So
we need the space so we can cram more people in. That's what you're arguing right now.
It's just that the idea that having these giant lawns, which is what everybody wants, they want their giant lawn, and then they spend the rest of their weekends doing something meaningless, which is mowing their goddamn lawn.
Maybe they like mowing their lawn.
You asked for controversy, I'm giving you controversy.
It's fine. I'm enjoying this.
Right on. Okay.
Sean, what's your most controversial opinion?
My most controversial opinion?
Yeah, that somebody's going to see this video and be like, wow, Sean's insane.
Most controversial opinion is that everyone should have green hair.
That is, I guess so. It's a cheap way out, Sean, but I'll allow it.
Statistically, you're just much happier and more successful if you have green hair.
Name another most famous person with green hair.
Joker?
Story checks out, all right. Sean, I appreciate the arguing.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Turn it up, Jordan.